can go on mute until it's my turn.
Yep, either way is fine. Hey, hello everyone. We're going to start here in just about 1 more minute, waiting for a couple more people to come into our webinar, and then we'll go ahead and start the presentation. In the meantime, if you want to add to the chat and tell us where you are at right now, if you have a particular watershed that you're in, and would like to add that to the chat as well, we'd love to see where everybody's located at today. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to start this presentation. The presentation today, by the way, will be recorded, but please ask us any questions that you have, and we'll try to get to those as we're going. And if not, we'll definitely answer questions here at the end of the presentation. So hello and welcome everyone. My name is Abby Hileman. I am the Salt Watch Coordinator here at the Izaak Walton League of America. And I'm here to talk to you about the Salt Watch program. This is our first clean water webinar of the season. And this is also the Salt Watch kickoff of season 6 of Salt Watch. And today we'll be discussing engaging youths and mobilizing adults. And today I'm also joined by 2 panelists, Kaitlyn Royal and Dave Bell, and I'll introduce them a little bit later in the presentation. So as I said, we're currently in our 6th season of chloride monitoring. And for the Salt Watch program, we can use your help. We're looking for volunteers to monitor for chloride runoff and to advocate for changes in application, distribution, storage, and cleanup of road salt. So some housekeeping notes for this presentation. We will answer questions after the presentation, so feel free to use that chat, and we'll try to answer questions as we go as well, but if not, we'll definitely get to those questions at the end. And I do want to mention for this presentation that I will be using salt and chloride, those words interchangeably throughout the presentation. So in many areas, just kidding, that is the last slide of the presentation. Let's try that again. So in many areas of the United States, we use road salt in order to stay safe during the winter weather. And we use that road salt on sidewalks and parking lots and roadways. But unfortunately, throughout the season, as the snow and ice melts and as rain falls, a lot of that salt gets washed into our waterways, streams and storm drains, and it can even end up in our drinking water as well. The United States yearly uses between 10 to 20 million tons of road salt every year, depending on the winter weather. So what makes up road salt? Road salt is typically sodium chloride, or that NaCl that you see there. It's the least expensive, and it's also the most common type of road salt used. There's also potassium chloride, magnesium chloride, and calcium chloride as well. And I do want to mention that salt bags that are labeled as eco-friendly or pet safe, they generally still contain those chlorides within them. And salt usage in the United States is really expensive. The immediate cost, especially of sodium chloride, is really low, about $73 per ton. But there are really indirect and long-term associated costs. I've read some articles stating that long-term costs can add up to 15 times the purchase price and the application of salt. So how did we get started here? So in 2017, a fellow at the Izaak Walton League of America, he was doing some stream monitoring, and he noticed that there is a really large road salt spill, this spill right here, in fact, right outside of the Izaak Walton League's national headquarters office in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And the salt spill was right next to a storm drain that led directly to a waterway called the Muddy Branch, which leads into the Potomac River. So he notified our local government, and they came by and they cleaned up this salt spill. But unfortunately, the chloride levels within the Muddy Branch and right next to the roadway there spiked to 3 times the toxic limit that the EPA has set. So inspired by our Save Our Streams program, which is a pretty long-running program that we have at the Izaak Walton League, the Izaak Walton League staff launched the Salt Watch program in 2018 to mobilize community scientists to monitor for chloride or salt levels in their local waterways and to advocate for better stream health and smarter salting practices. The goals of Salt Watch. So Salt Watch is a national science monitoring program that's focused on chloride or salt monitoring within local waterways. We want to raise awareness in the general public about the connection between salt and stream health, to identify chloride hotspots in freshwater, and also to advocate for smarter salt application of road salt, also smarter storage and cleanup of road salt as well. Many of our salt applicators are private contractors, and they have no idea how much salt to apply on roadways. In fact, many of them are actually contracted by the bag of salt, which leads to really gross oversalting practices throughout the United States. To put this in perspective, a 12-ounce drinking mug full of salt holds enough salt to salt a 20-foot-long driveway or about 10 sidewalk squares. Putting down more salt does not increase its effectiveness. It only increases the amount of salt that enters the environment. This graphic is from Wisconsin SaltWise. Salt really tends to persist in the environment, meaning that it doesn't go away. Salt can alter the composition of soil. It can corrode our infrastructure, our vehicles, our homes, garages, roadways, and it puts our aquatic wildlife at risk. It only takes 1 teaspoon of salt to permanently pollute 5 gallons of water, and therefore a 50 pound bag of salt can pollute 10,000 gallons of water. So it really can be a big issue. It does impact our wildlife. It affects fish, but macroinvertebrates, plankton, and microbes may be even more sensitive than fish. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the term macroinvertebrates, they're small organisms such as dragonfly larvae, caddisfly larvae, crayfish, and some other organisms that many people study, including our Save Our Streams program, to learn more about stream health. And their presence and sometimes absence of those certain macroinvertebrates can actually indicate the health of streams. So they're impacted by this road salt runoff. And then vernal pools may also be more intensely affected, as well as the organisms that spawn in them. Vernal pools are waterways that are seasonally occurring. They usually develop with the seasonal thaw of ice and snow. But again, as we know, as ice and snow melt, that brings that runoff salt into those waterways and sometimes into those vernal pools. And many sensitive organisms, such as salamanders and frogs, spawn in those environments, and so that can put them at risk. And then mammals can be impacted not only from drinking water, but also as we're salting our roadways too. Some animals like deer and moose and elk, they can actually use roadways as salt licks, and that can bring them closer to the roadways, which can impact them and the drivers that drive on those roadways. And then drinking water impacts as well. Chloride is different than chlorine. It does not disinfect water. And unfortunately, our wastewater treatment plants are usually not set up to actually remove chlorides from the water. Because it's really, really expensive to do so. And that makes it so a lot of those chlorides actually end up in people's drinking water. So folks who are on low sodium diets, they might not know that they're getting extra sodium in their diets from that the potassium chloride rather, that's going into their waterways, or sodium chloride rather. And so they're getting more salt in their drinking water. And as I mentioned before, the chloride is very corrosive, and that can impact health in drinking water as well if pipes become corroded. So Salt Watch within the United States, we've established that chlorides are a problem in our environment. And so what are we doing about this? This is something that we certainly cannot do alone. So we've teamed up with a number of organizations around the country to educate community members and local governments to reduce our salt consumption and to advocate for changes in our salting practices. So these organizations are our official Salt Watch partners, which are the blue stars, which I'll have a blown up map here in a second, and participating organizations, which are those red dots. It's both through you as volunteers and through these organizations that we're making a really big difference. And as of today, we have 23 official Salt Watch partners and 325 participating organizations. So these are our official Salt Watch partners. And here are some of their logos. And with that, I would like to introduce you to one of our guest presenters today, Kaitlyn Royal. Kaitlyn is a student at Allegheny College in Meadville, Pennsylvania, where she's majoring in biology and environmental science and sustainability and minoring in education. She works at Allegheny College's Creek Connections, which is a watershed-based environmental education outreach program that provides environmental education to local middle and high school students. Kaitlyn is also our October Salt Watcher of the month. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this presentation over to Kaitlyn.
Thank you, Abby. So I am a student at Allegheny College, and I work for an organization called Creek Connections, which is an environmental education organization that investigates local waterways. And we partner with local middle and high schools to do water quality analysis. So this is done via the chemical analysis, where we have test kits, and biological analysis, where we're looking at macroinvertebrate samples that the students are taking, and then doing PTI or pollution tolerance indexes with them. And our overall goal is just to increase awareness of natural resources and specifically watersheds. And we also have a goal of having students have a hands-on experience in the science realm. And a lot of the students that we work with would otherwise not have this outdoor in the creek experience. And so we're there to provide that for them. You can go to the next slide. And so, like I said, we do chemical water quality assessments, and we use 9 parameters. My favorites include dissolved oxygen, alkalinity, and pH. The last 2 change into some really pretty colors, and it excites the kids. And these are just really hands-on tests that the students can work through and kind of use their science skills that they've learned in lab outside, and they can practice measuring and just some lab techniques and strengthen those skills. And sometimes it's the only time that students really get that hands-on lab experience. And so we want to have them have a wonderful time outside doing that. And then you can go to the next slide. So throughout our time at Creek Connections, we are usually working with the 9 test kit parameters that I talked about, but COVID hit. And like everyone else, we had to change the way that we ran our programming. And we could not take our a little bit more complicated kits into schools and kind of give them to the teachers and say, here you go, figure it out. Even though that they do have detailed instructions, that just would have been really overwhelming for teachers and for students and for us trying to talk about it over Zoom calls with students. And so during COVID, we kind of had to switch gears. And so we decided that we wanted to use the Salt Watch program, which we had been doing just as staff members before, but we wanted to start doing that with students because it was something that was very easy. A test strip is a lot easier than a test kit that has 3 different chemical packets that you have to shake and add at different times. And so we decided that we were going to involve Salt Watch into our programming. So we would collect some samples and we would occasionally go in and do presentations about Salt Watch's background information. If you want to head to the next slide. And so we wanted the students to see how salt was being included in their watershed and how even their impacts from their school made a difference in the stream that ran behind their school, Mill Run. And so the students started with samples that we took at Tamarack Outflow, which is a lake that is where Mill Run starts. And then Mill Run runs behind the Meadville Area Middle School, which is the students that we were working with, and flows under Meadville and into French Creek. And so we had the students test at several different testing sites along Mill Run, starting before the school, at the school, after the school, down in town, and right before it heads into French Creek. And we really wanted students to see the kind of collection that the waterway takes of salt as it moves past roads and into Meadville and collects all of that road salt along the way. And then you can hit to the next slide. And so in doing that, we wanted the students to get a sense of place. We wanted them to appreciate what happens around them and to kind of have that sense of identity in Mill Run and how important it was because it runs right behind their school. We wanted them to feel proud that they had a healthy waterway and that they were monitoring and helping take care of that waterway. We had some adventures along the way because whenever it gets cold, it gets icy. And so there were some points where we were breaking the ice to get the samples. But those were all really fun adventures for me and my coworkers. And then to go in and see the students do their tests or to watch them via Zoom was really fun to see them have that like, this is like a problem because we're getting these really high levels. And so you can go to the next slide. And so this map shows all the different places that we tested and took samples at the blue dots. And then we had the students create a Google map of where we had taken the test and brought it into them. And that was used at the Creek Connections Symposium, which is a student research symposium that happens in April every year. In the past 2 years, we've had to do it online, but usually it's held at Allegheny College or down in Pittsburgh. And so the students came up with a plan that they wanted to use their ideas of how road salt affects mill run, which you can see in their ideas board at the bottom, and make short little informational videos about how those ideas involved how they learned from their testing of mill run. You can head to the next slide. And so we wanted to include MIWEs, which are meaningful watershed educational experiences. And so we wanted them to do an action project based on what they found from their salt watch endeavors. And so we had our first group of students do informational online infographics that we could share on our Facebook page. And so on this slide, we can see something that the kids made. And we posted on our Creek Connections Facebook page so that we could share that with the community. And then if you could go to the second slide. With our second group, we decided that we wanted them, the students actually decided that they wanted to draw pictures and make posters with little quick informational catchphrases that had to do with Salt Watch. And this is what the students came up with. They were beautiful, beautiful pictures that our little artist made, and they had some really funny, like "Don't spread salt like COVID-19" catchphrases that they included. And then we took these posters and shared them, and they shared them with their school as well. You can go to the next slide. And this is a spreadsheet that we had the students look at that showed how from the fall to the winter, and into the spring, how salt levels increased. You could go to the next slide. And in Salt Watch, I learned that you have to be flexible, and that I got more experience with EE and to learn some tools and how to partner with other programs and professionals in EE. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Kaitlyn. That was a really awesome presentation. Doing place-based environmental education with school students is incredibly important, and we have to teach our students to love the environment before we can teach them how to save it. And I think that Creek Connections and Kaitlyn's teachings are some really excellent examples of that. For the Salt Watch program, students aren't the only individuals that we're reaching. In a moment, Dave Bell, one of our longtime volunteers for the program, is going to speak about some of his advocacy outreach in the community and how it has impacted him and what he's doing to make a change. So Dave Bell is a volunteer streamkeeper for the Tacony-Tacony-Frankfort Watershed Partnership, or TTF Watershed, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and is based in the Tacony-Tacony-Frankfort Creek watershed. He is a master watershed steward through Penn State Extension, a merchant marine officer, and an author of navigation books for adults and ecology books for children, one of which he will speak about today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dave Bell.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. So, yeah, I live in the Tacony-Tacony-Frankfort watershed, and if you look at the map here, it's that sort of teal-colored blob just to the right of center, and to the northeast is Pennypack, and to the northwest is Wissahickon. And Tacony Creek starts in Montgomery Township, Pennsylvania. When it goes into Philadelphia, the name changes to Tacony Creek, and then it enters the Delaware as Frankfort Creek. So that's why we have those three names. And the TTF Watershed Partnership is my local watershed group. Okay, next, please. So a few years ago, I observed a township truck salting the road, and they put so much salt down, as you can see, it turned the streets white. There were chunks of it on the sidewalk and also up on the lawns. And this happened before a forecast snow. And that snow turned out to be just a dusting. And the salt stayed on the streets until the next heavy rain. Next, please. Being more familiar with salt water and brackish water in my work as a ship captain, I figured I needed to learn some more about this issue. So I went to the meeting of the Township Environmental Advisory Council to see what I could find out. They're very knowledgeable, hardworking, dedicated volunteers who are working on a lot of issues, but salt was not one that was really a focus, not on their radar. I also signed up to take the go through the Penn State Extension Master Watershed Steward Program and became certified there. And also around that time, my watershed group, along with Pennypack and Wissahickon, did a presentation for the Streamkeepers on the Salt Watch. And we had someone from Izaak Walton League remotely, and then the local watershed guys also trained us and told us what to do. So I signed up, and I got two sets of kits. Next one, please. And I started doing checking levels in headwater creeks in my township. So this first one here is channelized creek. It's called Bader Creek, and it's got residential properties with big lawns and streets on both sides. Next one. And this unnamed Tookaney Creek headwater has a park on one side and a large parking lot for a factory on the other side. Next, please. So learning more about it, I came to understand that the salt in the fresh water was a regional problem. Just looking at other sites and reports from Izaak Walton League, also talking with other streamkeepers who had started doing this as well, and articles in the local newspapers. So I put together information and I did a presentation for the Township EAC, and they passed a motion to make it a priority issue. They also helped them put together an information sheet for handout at public events. I compiled the resources for the township website, and a lot of that came from what I saw on the Izaak Walton winter salt website, but also some local resources, including best practices for townships, for individuals, for contractors. Responded to a request from the neighboring township EAC for information and passed that along to one of their members for presentation at their EAC. And I did a presentation for my county master watershed stewards. Okay. So this is just a screenshot from what's on and what I got put on the township website. And at the end of this, Abby or someone else will share the URLs for these with you. I also included these infographics from TTF and one from Wissahickon. Okay. So here are those infographics. And you can find these at the websites. The Wissahickon Watershed Group is called Wissahickon Trails, and TTF Watershed Partnership is also easily found on the internet. Okay. The past couple of winters, I see how on the Facebook pages for the township, there's either the township officials or police or elected commissioners put posts on warning people to shovel their sidewalks within 24 hours, drive carefully and that stuff. So I kind of took that idea and started posting winter salt alerts just before each snowfall, just with a sentence or two, and then a link to some more information for people. Okay. Going back to that salting event before a dusting, I contacted the Public Works Department to ask them about it, and their response was not really enlightening. I went on to email the commissioners and township managers this spring and let them know that I monitor sites in the township, that salt in the creek is a persistent issue in this region. My own commissioner emailed back and he asked for some more information. So because I had the data from myself and from other TTF Streamkeepers who were doing this, I was able to tell them that, at some of the sites that the baseline readings have quadrupled, readings after the first rainfall have doubled. And in some cases, we had readings that were just off the charts. I followed, and they let me know, the township manager emailed back and said, he thanked me for the information and said that he was working on it with Public Works as far as finding ways to lessen their impact. I followed up last month, and all I got from them back was that they're still in talks and they're discussing how they can reduce the impact, and they'll let me know what they end up deciding to do. Okay. Meanwhile, TTF partnered with Stroud Water Research Center to do a pilot program that they call the Chloride Blitz. So TTF Streamkeepers got together. The idea is to do this off season and to do a bunch of sites all the same time on the same day. So you looking at the map here, you see the blue lines are areas that we did not sample. The orange lines represent readings that were between 120 and 230 milligrams per liter, and the red lines up at top there were over 230 milligrams per liter. Okay, and then we did this again in just last month, and you see we did more sites and found similar results. Okay. The other thing I've done is that I have a new edition of my book, Awesome Chesapeake, and this has new chapters on citizen science and watersheds. And the citizen science chapter goes through a bunch of different parameters and how kids, and with the help of their parents or teachers, can assess the health of their streams. And there is a section there on salt. And also in the book and on the webpage, there's links to different resources for people, mostly having to do with citizen science. And Izaak Walton League and Salt Watch, of course, are in those links, among those links. Next, please. These are a couple of essays or blogs or blobs or whatever they're called these days that I wrote. The one, Where Do You Live? I'm basically renouncing my citizenship in Abington Township and declaring myself a citizen of the watershed. And watershed districts, I take it a step further and urge that we set up our legislative districts by watershed rather than these arbitrary lines that they draw on the map. it's kind of central to both of them is the idea that, what if we don't live in cities, but we live in watersheds? So in closing, I just respectfully note that you all responded very nicely to Abby's invitation to put your watershed in the chat. And I just suggest that you maybe do that the next time somebody asks you where you live. Instead of saying your town, say the watershed. And in my experience, that's opened it up to conversations about waters and watershed. And now back to Abby. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Dave. And for those of you who celebrate Christmas, that book might be a good present for any young readers interested in citizen science, of course, in conjunction with a free Salt Watch kit as well. So we've heard about some great ways that Kaitlyn and Dave are using the Salt Watch program to impact their communities. And for both of their stories, education really is key. And we can't have education about the issue of road salt pollution without having data to back it up. And so here is where you as volunteers come in. So how do you get started with Salt Watch? The first thing to do is to request a Salt Watch kit. And this can be done on our website, which is saltwatch.org. Or if you're looking for bulk kits for your organization, you can request those by emailing me at saltwatch@iwla.org. And I'll have those links at the very end for you as well. So when you request a Salt Watch kit, when you receive it, it will come with 4 chloride test strips that test chloride within a range of 30 to 600 parts per million. It will have some sample testing instructions, a conversion chart for converting your chloride Quantab strip into parts per million, and then also data uploading instructions for using a Water Reporter app, which is a free app to upload your data to one of our databases. Historically, our program was called the Winter Salt Watch, as volunteers mostly monitored during the winter. However, many volunteers are finding that there are high levels of chloride within their streams or local waterways year-round, so they are now monitoring year-round. Winter is still our busiest season for monitoring and our most critical time to monitor, as that's when road salt is being applied to the roadways. So for you to go out and monitor, do what makes the most sense for you, what works best for you for monitoring, whether it's 4 times a year or consistently throughout the year. If you're monitoring 4 times per year, so with your 1 Salt Watch kit, we ask that you go out and monitor once before winter weather to get your baseline reading. After the first winter storm, which is when road salt has been applied to the roadways, after the first thaw or rainstorm of the winter, and then after the next rain event. And if you are going out consistently throughout the year, just try to keep it as consistent as possible, such as going out the first Saturday of every month. And again, education and advocacy, they really go a long way. So how to take your sample. When you receive your kits, again, it'll come with 4 of those test strips. When you're going out into the field, you're going to want to bring at least 1 of those test strips with you for your 1 sample site, a small jar or a cup, ideally plastic or glass. A little juice glass works really well. And then you're going to add water to that cup, and you're going to want to rinse and repeat that 3 times. So what that looks like, fill up your water jar, empty it out, fill it up, empty it out, fill it up, empty it out, and then fill it up again, leaving about 1/2 inch to about 1 inch of water at the bottom. The reason we're doing that rinse and repeat 3 times is to make sure that we're not contaminating our sample with any chloride from previous test locations, or if there is any residue of some sort within the jar that you're using. And then you're going to want to wait about 3 minutes for that test to read the chloride within the stream. And so as you can see with this test that's in that jar right there, at the very top of that Quantab strip, it's sort of an orange color. After you wait about those 3 minutes, you'll know when your test is done, when that orange color there at the top actually turns black. And as you notice with this test strip here on the right, there's also a sort of yellow or whitish bar going up. And what you're going to do is actually read the very top where that peak occurs, and that will be how many quantab units you have for your test strip. Once you have that number, so for this particular strip, that is 4 quantab units because that peak actually hits right at 4 there. Then you're going to use your conversion chart. And when you are going to submit your conversion chart using the Water Reporter app, a picture like this is perfect. You want to make sure that you're taking that entire conversion chart with your quantab strip placed right on the conversion chart. So that makes the reading really easy to do. So again, we're at 4 parts per million, or 4 quantab units there, and we're converting to parts per million. So what we're going to do is go over, find where 4 quantab units is, and go over to 157 parts per million, or milligrams per liter, which is our final reading of chloride in that local waterway. And in your kit, you'll receive instructions like this. This is one of those instructional guides for how to participate in SaltWatch. And following that information is really important to make sure that we're getting all those readings in our system accurately. So what you want to do first, again, following that card, is sign up for a Water Reporter account. It's free. It's a downloadable app. And if you don't have a smartphone and just want to use a camera and a computer, that's totally fine. You can also use it on your desktop as well. So the first thing you want to do is download that Water Reporter app if you have a smartphone, or create an account on your desktop, set up your profile, and if you're using a smartphone, turn your location services on, and then you can actually use the Water Reporter app in the field, and it will automatically capture your latitude and longitude when you're out there getting your sample. Also, when you're setting up an account, it will give you some options for different groups to follow. You want to make sure that you're searching the Izaak Walton League of America in the search, and then clicking to join or follow the group. And this is important here for this next step. If you're on your smartphone out in the field, and again, this looks pretty similar on your desktop as well, you want to confirm the location of your report. If you're taking your phone out with you and you have service, again, it will automatically put your latitude and longitude coordinates in. If you're doing this after you're out in the field, like when you come back later, you're going to want to drag that purple arrow that says drag me to approximately where your location was when you took your sample. You want to add a description for your post. So was it the same day that you sampled? What day was it? What was the local weather conditions of that day, or potentially the day before? Are you in the middle of a drought? Those types of things for your description. More information is always better for this. And then add that photo to your report. Again, make sure that your photo takes the entire quantab unit and that conversion chart, so we can easily see that reading that you got. And then make sure that you're sharing, step 4 down here, sharing your report with the Izaak Walton League of America. That automatically uploads your data to our system. And then last but not least, submit your report, which is that little check mark at the very top right of your screen. And that'll go into the system. Once it's in, it will spit back this. This will be sort of on your feed, almost like a Facebook post. It will have the date that you submitted. It'll put your watershed in automatically. It will have your picture uploaded. It'll have a description that you wrote about your sample or your location, and then it will show whatever organizations that you tagged there at the bottom. So this individual tagged the Izaak Walton League of America. So all that information will be captured right there for you. And after you test, what should you do next? The first thing to do would be to take action. If you're finding high levels of chloride, let someone know, such as your local watershed entity. So report that data to them. You can always call different individuals throughout your community, such as your city or county government, different environmental groups as well, writing letters to the editor, educating your neighbors, local and state representatives, and sharing some of those best practices with property managers, even your neighbors, and doing some of those practices yourself is really, really important. It really takes a village to make a problem like this become lessened and to lessen our salt consumption as a nation. So just to share some of the results from our last season with all of you. So season 5 of Salt Watch, we had over 1,000 volunteers. So just so many people involved with this, which is really amazing to see. 3,333 sites sampled, almost 4,000 kits distributed, and data that came back from 24 different states across the United States, which is really great. Of the samples that we got was 5,336 samples. We're hoping to hit that and maybe even double it this year, which would be really, really amazing. Naturally, in the waterways, chloride does occur naturally in the environment between 0 to 100 parts per million. And so of the samples that we received, 26.3% were less than the 30 parts per million. 33.4% were between 30 and 100 parts per million. So all of those are sort of within those natural ranges that chloride potentially could be at. And then 22.3% are above the 100, but below 230 parts per million. And then 18% of the samples that came back from last year were toxic, above 230 parts per million. And the 230 parts per million, that is where water becomes toxic to freshwater wildlife. And then just to show some regional results too, this is the Delmarva region, or Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. So 1,042 data points, 11% were between the 0 and 30 parts per million, 28% between 30 and 100 parts per million, 33% between 100 and 230 parts per million, and then 28% were toxic, above the 230 parts per million. And in this area too, there is a lot of impermeable surfaces too. So a lot of roadways and sidewalks that are being salted and just creating more surfaces for runoff to occur too. This is the Philadelphia region, where last year we got 361 data points from sort of the greater Philadelphia region. 23% of those samples were between 0 and 30 parts per million. 37% were good, between 30 and 100 parts per million. 43% of those samples were again below that 230 parts per million, and then 17% of the samples that we got back were toxic. So another region with a lot of impervious surfaces where water cannot flow through. And then the Connecticut region, a lot less impermeable surfaces here, 324 data points. 35% excellent, 53% good, still below that 100 parts per million. 9% were fair, between 100 and 230 parts per million, and then 3% of the samples were toxic, which are above the 230 parts per million. So still a lot of really good data that we're getting back. And then for this year, so far across the United States, we have received 743 data points from 14 states. Since we haven't seen salting practices yet in a lot of states, some states have already seen snow events for this season. 38% of the samples we have received so far are excellent, between 0 to 30 parts per million. 45% are good, still below that 100 parts per million. 11% is fair, between 100 and 230 parts per million, and then 6% of the samples we've received so far have been toxic. So above 230 parts per million for the entire United States for the samples we've received. And I did want to share some sort of local things that we're doing in Gaithersburg, Maryland. The 3 photos on the left here with the plows, this was actually something that we did with G Park, which is the Gaithersburg Parks, Arts and Recreation Corporation, and they really spearheaded this project to do a Paint the Plow event where some local groups actually got their own snowplow to paint the blade of after learning a little bit about why salt is a problem, or oversalting in communities can become a real big problem. And this was a really cool event, not only for publicity, but for the fact that as these plows are going around the city of Gaithersburg during the winter time, that education is still happening. People are seeing the plows that they've painted and still learning a little bit about why oversalting can be a problem. And then also you can find us, if you're in and around Maryland, we do table at quite a few farmers markets in the area as well, and some different festivals too. So spreading the word with different groups and different organizations. And I did also want to mention that we do have advocacy resources on our webpage. Again, that webpage is www.saltwatch.org, or just saltwatch.org. And you click on the tab that says what you can do, and it'll bring you to this page, some things to start at home, get the word out, and then how to curb salt in your community. And there are best practices, sharing best practices on there as well as some templates for letters to the editor, flyers, and then letters for local city or state legislatures as well. And I think if you take anything away from this presentation, this is sort of that slide. This is an immediate thing that you can do. Educating your neighbors is really big as well. That education and advocacy go a really long way. Changing up our practices of salt to pre-treating roadways with brine solution can help to cut our salt usage in half in many cases, but education is really key. So during the winter time, shovel, clear your walkways before snow turns to ice, scatter that salt. Again, a 12-ounce drinking mug, like a cup of coffee, holds enough salt to treat a 20-foot driveway or 10 sidewalk squares. So really let those salt grains scatter a little bit further than maybe you've done in the past. Because again, more salt isn't going to help. It's just going to put more salt into the environment. And then something that you can do after like a winter storm has come and gone, if you see any excess salt on your sidewalk, you can actually sweep that salt up and reuse it as well for the next storm event. But sort of following these steps is something that you can do immediately, maybe while you're connecting data or while you're educating some of your neighbors as well. And then we'll have time right now for any questions that you have. So please put those in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll go ahead and answer them. Please check out our website at saltwatch.org. I just uploaded a bunch of results today, so you can see those updated results on our webpage under the results tab. You can also request your Saltwatch kit through our website. And if you have any questions whatsoever, even after this presentation, please email me at saltwatch@iwla.org. Or if you're an organization that would like to have some bulk test kits as well, you can reach out to me on there. Okay, so I'm going to look through some questions that we have. And Elizabeth Murphy wrote, another important action homeowners can take to address excess chloride environmental input is to check their water treatment and softener systems if they have them. Yes, that's a really good point too. Some other sources of salt are water softeners and then just wastewater discharge too. She mentions that most systems have a suggested application rate depending on household size and water usage, that many people might not be aware of that, and all systems must have a separate waste brine treatment system set aside from the septic system. Thank you for that, Elizabeth. That's a very good point too. That again, not all of the salt is coming from road salt, but there are some other sources of it as well. But road salt is definitely a big source of chloride pollution in our local streams. Okay, another question from Art. If we're taking salt water readings with our Save Our Streams monitoring, should we also take a salt watch reading on the same stream near a road intersection? So Sam or Heather, if one of you wants to answer that, since you guys are more so involved with the Save Our Streams monitoring than I am.
Sure. Sam here. So if you're doing the Save Our Streams monitoring, you're already likely doing chloride, which is the same test strips that are in our SaltWatch test kits. So please keep on doing that. We actually do pull that data and put it on our SaltWatch map that comes into where folks submit it in the Clean Water Hub, and then it shows up in the Clean Water Hub SaltWatch map as well. If you are interested in seeing how that roadway is impacting salt inputs in your stream, you could also do another chloride test farther up near that bridge crossing. It would be interesting to see how that differs from where you're doing your monitoring now. So not necessary, you're already doing the SaltWatch test, but if you're interested in seeing how that impact is taking place, please do add that extra site.
Thank you, Sam. And I have another question here from Laura. I've been sending multiple photos, I believe on the Water Reporter app, but it looks like the app will only post one photo. So each submission will only post one photo. If it seems to be glitching for any reason, like if you're doing a submission and then another submission right after that, and some of your submissions aren't showing up, let us know and we can reach out to the folks at the Water Reporter app to see if they're having any issues with that. But otherwise, it should post one photo per post. So let me know if that didn't answer your question. But each time you go to post in the Water Reporter app, it'll be for one photo. You can always make more than one post. Okay. Do we have any other questions today for this webinar? Did I miss anyone's questions?
I didn't see any other ones come in, Abby.
Okay. Perfect. If anyone has any additional questions, again, please visit our website at saltwatch.org, and any additional questions that aren't answered on our webpage or through this webinar, you can email me at saltwatch@iwla.org, and I will get back to you. This webinar also is being recorded as well, and will be posted on our website at some point too. So thank you all very much for attending today, and a big thank you to Sam and Heather for being in the background and admitting everyone and answering questions, and a huge thank you for Dave Bell and Kaitlyn for being our panelists today for this Clean Water webinar, and thank everybody for being here today too for the first Clean Water webinar of the season. So thank you very much, everyone. And please feel free to email me or go to our website if you have any more questions.